welcome back. Here we
Welcome
go.
back. We are going to
fun
talk
starts.
about we're going to talk about process. Process was the community's way of getting us as a group into what was called a meeting, but it was a group experience, group shaming, group exposure, group abuse.
And all of the above, really. So processes were a core part of the experience in the cult alongside trance. Process was like the next step after trance. So on the hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
So it was an integral part of the experience there, and it was also expected that
Mandatory.
everybody participate, everybody go when they're called. There were usually large group processes that would involve the entire adult community. Like every single adult was expected to be there, and then there were also. They also started them for us when we were kids in school, and they would be called What's Up, right, in school. Do you remember those?
Again, I think I was an adult by that point.
That's right.
For the most part.
That's right. I forgot.
Yeah, we have to remind the audience, I was an official adult at 12.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't do any of the kid stuff. So.
Yeah, so Rose was in the adult process.
I really was. I was put into the adult processes at 12. It was so effing disturbing.
Yeah.
The things that I would hear at 12 years old, these adults talk about. So, I mean, I think I was a part of the kids ones to an extent, but it wasn't like what you guys had. You guys had an actual what do they call it? What's
they
up?
called them I'm pretty sure that they called them What's Up for a while. Processes, unlike trance, were not always, they weren't scheduled weekly. It wasn't like a weekly thing necessarily. They did schedule them, but I feel like they weren't a every week mandatory, like there was a Sunday trance every Sunday. It was a little bit more random, and also there were big group processes, just like there were big group trances, and then there were also a lot of smaller processes. And again, unlike trance, there, sometimes there were processes every night, right, for different people. They were happening all the time. The big group ones weren't.
No,
those
the
were
big
more
group
scheduled.
ones, but there was something going on.
There was always
every
something going
single
on.
day. Some kind of process was going on every single day because that Trina and Steven, that was their job, was to process people. That's what they did every day, all day.
In the early days, but I don't feel like really Dr. Death and Cersei were the main people who were the head processors. I feel like they led most of the
again, this is where generations, it changed so dramatically for each generation, but growing up, I believe from what I can remember as a kid, there was there was the adult group processing, and then there was a lot of where's my mom? Oh, she's in a meeting. It was just randomly
and sometimes
throughout the
you
day.
would just get a phone call and be called into a process. You never knew, or even a trance sometimes.
But there was never a process done without a minister. So it was definitely a form of organization from the beginning, where it was a minister was leading the process, or all the ministers were leading the big group processes. I mean, there was authoritative figures in leading it, and then there was all of us who showed up. A lot of times, the process would be kind of created or centered around what happened in trance. So if you were on the chopping block in trance, you just knew.
Well, sometimes trance would lead directly into a process, directly after it. There would be a trance, something would come up or whatever, and then that would Duran would say take this into a process, essentially. And so there were oftentimes trances that led directly into processes, or you just you would have processes that were on. They would call a process for everybody, and everybody had to go. So it was similar to
I've always tried so hard to explain what would be comparable to a process, like for people to understand. And I don't think there's anything quite comparable to it. Like,
well, these are very standard in these, again, like these cult
that's what I was going to say.
dynamics.
Like Scientology, I've read a lot and watched a lot about Scientology, and like Scientology, the way they would work is they would, put people independently into these like very like locked rooms where they would interrogate them, and then whatever they would pull out of them that would then become a public matter to be shamed at in more of a group setting. And so that felt similar, right? When I would like read or watch that, I was like, okay, that would be something that could kind of, I can relate to what happened to us.
Even when I was in my early 20s, I worked at a dance studio for a while, and the owner of the dance studio had an experience living in a cult also. And isn't that so random?
Yes. I actually remember this now.
Yeah. And that was during the period of time where I was like finally starting to accept and call it a cult, because after you leave a situation like that or an experience like that, sometimes it takes a minute for you to like fully own and claim and acknowledge it as a cult, especially for kids like us who were born and raised in it.
Yeah.
And
told our
and
whole
we're
lives
so
it's not a
manipulated,
cult.
right? Around like the fact that it's not a cult. Everybody else thinks it's a cult, but it's not a cult.
So
we know inside that it's not a cult, even though everyone else is calling it a cult, right? And we lost a court case saying that it's a cult.
Court cases.
All that aside, but I was working at a dance studio, and she had an experience in a cult, and their version of like group processing, shaming, and like being on the chopping block was called like being on the pickle jar, but it's the same thing. Like one person would be the person who was like getting the group shaming for the night, and they called it like being on the pickle jar. That was like their thing. So, anyways, but yeah, it's pretty common and standard to have these like group shaming, humiliation type scenarios. Ours, of course, were riddled with alcohol drinking, cigarette smoking, and unlike trance that had more of an end point around an hour, processes would go hours and hours and hours on end.
It would go like 8 hours.
And sometimes they'd roll into days of processing over like the same thing and the same dynamic with people.
So it was like very mentally beaten down. Like if they were trying to get a point across, they would beat you down until you surrendered. They were like a group, like emotional. And the thing is like you were surrendered before you even walked in. You were just trying to like not.
Well, you had to surrender. You surrendered just to going like in the first place, because again, it's one of those scenarios where this is a highly spiritual activity that we're doing.
And what was the purpose? So if they said the point of the processing was to
bring people closer to each other.
Okay, so it was like air out your dirty laundry.
Yes, is that again, like in process, now we have this opportunity to really truly expose ourselves and share our judgments and be truly honest with each other, which again, the rest of the world is just full of liars. We're the people who are being really honest and getting to the core of human vulnerability, and through that becoming like these closer, like this close-knit family, spiritual family. So the processing, that was part of it, was that. And then also I think part of it was to work out your your spiritual like faults and the things that were wrong with you based on like what the ministers or like the spirit, right, said was wrong with you. Because there was always something wrong with you. The dynamic that was created was that there's always something wrong inside of you that has to be worked out. So even just like trance, like sometimes these group processes that would be scheduled, like you wouldn't know what was going to be brought up. You wouldn't know you wouldn't always know unless there was something that was definitely going on like very clearly between people or from a trance. Like sometimes you would just go in not really knowing what was going to be brought up and what the dynamic was going to be. And so again, there's that feeling of, I have to do this. So I have to override every part of me that doesn't want to go to this, because this is expected. It's mandatory. I have to go. So
but there was also themes to it, like.
But in general processes, there weren't. There was just
so
it
hard
was
for
just
me
an
sometimes to remember. Like I
open-ended-
feel like my energy is starting to get activated just
Yeah.
even talking about it, because it's like it was such a, I mean, you really had to dissociate in order to survive.
Right. Well, and the reason that you had to that we would disassociate, one was because we were overriding every part of our physiology that was telling us to fucking run. We had to turn off our flight response, because no one really wants to sit in a room and be treated and yelled at and called like the scum of the earth, whores, sluts, like, you know, you're bitches. I mean, literally every single word.
Yeah, and everybody else, like your friends, your family, is also expressing like the same thing to you. Like
Right.
that was the thing, is like, so these processes, you would walk in and we would all sit in a circle. So there would be chairs, or there'd be like not even chairs. Let's just say we all sat in a circle. I don't know what was what was it? I'm trying to remember.
There was usually like there was usually some form of throne or place that they sat. Like they usually sat in the front of the room, or they always all sat together. The ministers always were together.
Yeah.
They you know, there are multiple processes, like they're very vivid ones that I can remember, where, you know, like they would have a spot where they would sit, and then everybody would just kind of gather around. And if it was if there weren't like, if it wasn't a full process of like everybody, then you could sit in a circle. But sometimes it was just everybody packed into a room. And so those were always, I mean, it was always chaotic no matter what. But so you would have to prepare yourself to go into a room where you didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't know if you were going to be on the chopping block or not. And when you went in, you just had to like pretend again, like you were okay and you wanted to be there. So there was always much more like nervous, chaotic energy running through the room than there would be in a trance. To me, like everybody was a lot more antsy, and that was also like the alcohol and the cigarettes were kind of numbing people a little bit so that they could get through. But there was a lot of really antsy energy at the beginning, because you just really didn't know how it was going to go and whether you were going to fully survive the night intact. And also
survive emotionally and physically. Like that's
but also
the thing.
Emotionally, physically, but also like in your life. Like you didn't know if you were going to be kicked out of your house and moved into a different house, if people were going to, again, couples were going to be split up, like what dynamic you were walking in with and what dynamic you were leaving in. You just didn't know what was going to happen. And it was brutal to be on the chopping block. It was brutal to watch it happen to other people. And then the next layer of that is to also like be encouraged to participate. So there were just so many chaotic things that were going on in those rooms. And so emotionally for people, most of us were so highly like overwhelmed in our systems that we would just start disassociating.
Well, I've been asked this before. Why didn't you just get up and leave?
Yeah. So that was not allowed. You did not get up and leave a process.
There was nowhere to go. Where were you going to go? You were going to leave and then be brought back into a process and be even more abused because you left. There was nowhere to go. Like you could sit and daydream about packing your bags and walking down the mile strip to the highway, like, you know, like most men did, like in the middle of the night, because again, like if you said you weren't going to be participating in public, you were going to be abused. Like that's how it was.
Yeah. And that's why I think, like, I mean, again, with trance, it was like you could go and kind of try and hide in a corner and just get through it. You couldn't do that in a process. Yeah. So like, again, they were done in the light, unfortunately. And you just didn't know. You just didn't know what was going to happen.
I don't know why I'm feeling this to talk about it, but I'm going to give an example of something that happened more when I was older, because I have a hard time even like grasping my brain of how it happened or what happened as a child in process. It was much more abusive for me in my recollection when I was married and I had children in processing. The whole thing was abusive, but there was one process that always stands out to me. I was 3 months pregnant with my third child, and the theme of the process was for everybody to go around and give me their body judgments. Meaning that everybody in the room, there's probably 30 people, men and women, and every single one of them, I would sit in the chair and every single one of them took their turns telling me their judgments on me about my body. And I was 3 months pregnant with my third kid. And I sat there. This was like if you were on the chopping block and that's what it was, like you would sit there and cry. You would sit there and just cry while people went from person to person telling you their judgments on you about your body. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was supposed to get us closer to God. I mean, it's just gross. Like that was just one example but that happened. I mean, I was so conditioned at that point. I think I was 26 around that time. So like I was so conditioned at that point that was just the norm. It was kind of like, okay, just throw it at me. Like, let me just get this over with.
Just out of curiosity, who was leading that
the
meeting?
Lawyer in Buttercup.
Oh, that was a Lawyer in Buttercup. And did they say what the purpose was in that for you?
Because Dr. Duran.
Okay.
I believe it was because I was in my ego about the way I dressed. Like there was something I did dressing that made me look like a sexual object. And so Dr. Duran wanted it to be very clear that everyone that I put myself out there for people to like. I basically asked for it by wearing a shirt that was maybe too low cut. I don't remember. I remember my ex-husband started it and told me that his judgment on me was that I was fat like my mother. At 3 months pregnant, like it was nasty. It was nasty. Yeah. And and encouraged. So yeah. Like saying something like that, even just that one statement, right, from a husband to his wife who is now pregnant with his third child, right? That was encouraged. Oh no, there was. It was like we're so proud of you for saying that, for saying the truth, because we know her mother is fat. So it's obviously like there's a big comparison there, and it's probably because she's just as lazy as her mom, and because she does this that's negative about her mom, and they're like that one in particular like has always scarred me.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and for good reason, right? Like, what did you leave that meeting with, out of curiosity?
You know what? I don't even know. I know that when I got pregnant with my fourth child, when I was not in the cult and like in a healthy relationship, that came up for me when I was about 3 months pregnant, and I remember being like having a lot of struggle with this body hatred. Yeah,
because that was really encouraged there. Like there was a lot of body shaming, and there were really no boundaries or limits in processing and really like the ugly things that people could say to each other, like around your physical appearance, around like
the way you raised your kids,
the way you
ate your food, the way like it just didn't
you
matter.
Breathed wrong, they could use that against you. There really were no limits. You could not go low enough. Yeah. Right. And that started with the ministers on down, like the way that the ministers treated processing, the way that they talked to the community members, the way that they talked to the children, like they started with that language and that way of treating people. And then that just kind of filtered and was encouraged in everybody who would walk into a process.
Yeah. And there was themes, like, I mean, I know you could attest to this, like being a teenager. Like I remember a process because you guys had done something as a group of teenage girls. You guys, I think you had rolled the car. I think it was that process. I know just that one little thing. And I remember
one car, Rose, one car, and we tried to flip it back over. Okay, in our defense, just one car. Okay?
So they were teenagers cruising around, and they had an accident, and they were hurt. And the next day, it had nothing to do with the fact that they had an accident and they were hurt. They were all put into a process and called the most hideous names. And basically, it was like they brought it onto themselves, and it was their sexual energy. It's because they were whores. I mean, we could go on and on and on of all the reasons that is why that accident happened. And I just
had a trance about it too.
It was a trance too.
There was a trance too.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, that's just one thing I remember from you particular, where I remember being the outside part of it, and the horrible thing. And I don't remember saying anything, but like some of this processing that you have to do when you were in this is that you also probably jumped on that bandwagon too and said, "Oh yeah, you guys are whores." You know, like you were either getting it or you were giving it, because that's how they had us trained.
Yeah, so they set the dynamic up so that you have to play the game, and you have to play the game the way that they mandate that the game is played, which means you show up to processes, you sit, you allow the ministers to go wherever they want to with it. Yeah, you do not get up and leave. So you really do have to shut down every instinct within your side.
Pee. I mean, I was scared to get up and go pee in those processes.
Yeah, you don't want to move. Again, you do not want to draw any attention to yourself. Like, you don't want to draw attention to yourself in that space at all. It's better to fade into the wallpaper, essentially, and not be seen. So yeah, you don't get up and pee. You don't get up and make yourself another drink or smoke another. I mean, you don't do anything. I was just like frozen in panic most of the time through those processes. And again, like there are some, like what you're talking about, where there is a theme, and even with that one, right? I doubt that anyone was screaming at you. They were just all very calmly picking you apart, right? So that was one way that they did it. And then the other way that they did it was by really, truly screaming, raging at people. Like things, like raging to the point where they're throwing things across the room. Sometimes people are getting like actually hit or beaten up. There was a dominance that these ministers had to create in the room to like show that they had the power. And so like within all of our systems, the people who are just walking in there trying to survive these experiences, you're shutting down everything inside of yourself, every instinct, which is truly nobody wants to sit there frozen in panic and not run from a predator. But we were not allowed to see and acknowledge these people as predators. They were our leaders. They were the ministers. They were the people who are closest to God.
Than our parents.
Yeah.
Like they were.
So again, like every instinct inside is telling you, get the fuck out of here, but you have to shut all of that down. So when you override your system, right, enough in those scenarios, that becomes natural to you. Now the natural state is to sit here and realize that like there really is no out. I don't have a way of leaving. I have to stay here and experience this and go through it. And then on the other side, like the relief of just getting on the other side of a process. That was what it was like every single time. Every single process was like that. Whether you were the person who was on the chopping block, who was getting screamed at, who was getting yelled at for very little random things, or like for being a teenager and rebelling or acting out. The really harmful process for me as a teenager was not from the car accident. For me personally, it was when we all snuck out to drink. We went out and we were going out and partying, which the thing about that.
How old are you?
So I was 16, 17. Yeah. So and the thing about that was that like it was covertly and overtly encouraged to drink and to smoke, and they had given us smoke. They had given us all of that when we were little, and then turned around and like we would get in trouble about it. We have these examples, and again, Trunchbull was the ultimate example of the cool kid who was partying, and it was this weird covert thing where it was set up for us that it was expected that we do that, and then at the same time when we did it, then we were going to get in trouble and be processed for it. So the one of the ones that was like really bad for us happened right around 9/11. They caught us sneaking out. So then we had a process, and they told us that we were just like the terrorists that had attacked. They literally
God,
called us.
I remember Mom saying
They
that.
literally called us the terrorists.
They did. There was a whole
for
like
3
months.
months.
Yeah,
we
there
were
was
shunned.
months. Yeah.
3
I remember
months
that.
we were shunned. I was made to be, one of Trina's daughter's like slaves.
Which
I
one?
basically,
The middle one?
yeah.
Okay.
I basically lived in her house. We had I can't remember if I'm pretty sure they made us drop out of school because we were going to community college at that point because we weren't allowed to go to high school. So we all got our
How many girls was it?
There were it was everyone in my age group. So there were 5 or 6 of us.
Okay.
We had snuck out. Again, it was a car situation. We all snuck out to go party. Anna had her dad's car, and he was calling around because it was raining, and he wanted to make sure that the windows were rolled up. And they all realized that we were not where we said we were going to be. So I walked into the house at
Was Mom sitting in the dark?
Mom was in the dark.
I had one of these experiences.
In the dark, again, just like a trance. You walk in the house in the dark, and she goes, Sappho! I was like, and I just remember walking up to her room because she was upstairs. I think she was sleeping upstairs at that point, and she screamed at me for I don't even know how long. But the process that next day was so
and you
bad.
knew you were going to go to bed and wake up to
yeah,
horror.
and again, they were like you're just like the terrorists. You're the terrorists of the village, and we were literally shunned for a good 3 months for that. Walked around with our just the scum of the village at that point. And then again free reign to abuse us even more. I remember one day someone Trina's daughter came home from a trance and said that Duran had mentioned my name and sent love to me, and I was I about fell onto the floor because it had been 3 months of just being shunned.
Yeah.
And so I was oh, somebody still loves me, and I'm not that was probably one of the lowest lows. And also again, we're sitting in that process, and the girls are getting in trouble for that while the boys are all out having a real and true high school experience and going
Playing
to parties,
sports, doing
hanging
whatever
out with
they
girls,
wanted to.
doing whatever they want. But the girls doing that,
You
we're
need to
the
stay
terrorists
pure.
of the village, right? And even them, that was the meeting where Cersei said to me, "I will take my son to God if you don't have it in you. If you're too weak, I will take my son to God, because the holier than thou boy that her son that I was supposed to marry, who was out fucking and doing whatever the fuck he wanted at that point, right? I was the scum of the earth who wasn't able to take her son to God. And so it was just burying one thing after another. They laid every single thing that they could on us. And then again, every other young adult person who was in that room was encouraged to then express to us. They had all done the same shit. It's just that same cycle, right? That was an ugly one. That was a really ugly one for me.
Well,
and one I've had to
of
go back and do repair work for multiple times because of some of the specific things that were said in that room that I just carried with me for years. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say there was times so processing for me, there was that kind of group processing and you're in trouble. But then for me, because I was, I guess a smaller generation, I would say, I was 2 years older than you. I was 2 years younger than this older group of kids, but none of them had been born and raised in it. So they all had a different kind of, I don't know, they had a different kind of freedom, I would say.
The younger kids?
The older kids.
Oh, the older kids.
The kids that were older than me. And they were also definitely Trunchbull's entourage. So they were really protected in a different way by Trunchbull. Trunchbull could manipulate the situation no matter how it went to get them in trouble or not get them in trouble. And so I just fell in this very gray line as a teenager. I had those experiences, but then I had experiences where I would be randomly sitting at a fire. Like there was a lot of like sit around the fire and drink beer as teenagers for me. And it would just be literally up to whoever was sitting there would start something, and it would turn into that kind of process. And I was very much the target for that for my whole teenage years, because I was fighting against being with my like vibration. Like the person that I was supposed to be with was drunk and pondering after me at, starting 13, 14 years old. And we're in these party situations. And then there was just all this pressure of like, why aren't you getting with him? What makes you think you're better? I mean, there were some really nasty things that were said. I don't know if we're allowed to say it on YouTube or not. Like they used there was some specific like words that they would call you that were just horrible. And so like there was, for me, like there was this like group like, oh, there's going to be a process. But for my little generation, it was just like any situation you were in could turn into a process, being led by Trenchbull for the most part, but not always Trenchbull. Like I have some experiences where it was like Trina had sisters. So she was one of 5 sisters herself. And so her sisters would come in and out of the collective with their kids, and their kids always had some kind of power play.
Yes,
so
they
would start stuff
Yeah.
as when I was younger. And this is kind of, we can leave it or not. Like my like vibration also had a past life where he was Ulysses S. Grant.
Oh, Ulysses S. Grant.
Yes. So
I thought his dad wasn't it his dad?
He was Ulysses S. Grant.
Yeah, okay.
And so.
And his dad was obsessed with the Civil War.
Yeah,
it's weird how that happened.
Yeah, his dad was obsessed with the
Now
Civil
that you
War,
think
and
about
then
it.
Spirit told my like vibration that he was Ulysses S. Grant in his past life.
There was
so
also
I
a
was processed as
reincarnation
a
of Buddy
teenager
Holly
of who,
in the
Buddy Holly. But I was processed as a teenager of how dare I not want to be with Ulysses S. Grant. Like that was the theme, you guys. Like it was fucking nuts. Like I mean, there was these drunk women who were
that's
like,
a good question.
I can't believe that you would deny your like vibration, that he is Ulysses S. Grant. Like who do you think you are? And I always thought to myself, well, if he was Ulysses S. Grant, then who the fuck was I? Like
right. No one.
A no one.
You were a
Get back in your
chambermaid.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were a slave. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, true beans. If you look at Ulysses S. Grant and what he did in his life, yeah, I probably was.
Yeah,
If
it
we're
is
gonna
weird
believe in that.
how he was Grant in a past life, and his dad was like so effing obsessed with the Civil War. It's weird how those things went together.
Yeah, and look, that wouldn't be some kind of
No coincidence.
coincidence now. Yeah. So yeah, it was again just another big power play of how they're gonna tear us down. And
yeah, and there, it's funny because I was thinking about how there was a period where Trunchbull was holding processes with my age group, with us girls, when we were like 10 or 11. She was calling processes with us a bunch and like processing us about what we were wearing, how we were dressing. We didn't have clothes. We did not shop.
with the Fruit of the Loom shirt, you picked out the wrong color.
I mean, like we were getting about how we were playing Foursquare and like the little, she would call us like little sexual energies out playing Foursquare when we were like 10 and 11 years old. Like
sexual energy was a big word.
It was a big word for them. But like I thought I was thinking about this the other day because I was like, we didn't go shopping. We didn't have clothes. So like processing us about what we were wearing was insane, like absolutely insane. And again, it like fits into the narrative of everything there being insane and not making sense. But yeah, just the idea that she was
the leader of the
processing. Again, like she's 5 years older than me, so like I was 10, she was like 15 at that point,
telling you that you were a sexual energy playing Foursquare.
Yes, like it's just insanity, like absolutely. And it was just that stuff was just allowed. It was part of,
it was just our again, normal day-to-day
those
life.
processes were happening in school. She would call those processes with us. She would call us all off of the playground during recess to process us about those kinds of things. Like, is just crazy. Yeah. And we would also have we would get called out of school like for processes, or processes would happen in school. So that happened a lot too. Or like we had classes where like Dr. Death was our teacher, which was awful.
Horrible.
Creative writing classes.
Horrible.
Where he was the teacher and we would have to write about something. Or when we did the Crucible play, those ones always stick out to me. And then when we would be processed about, so you would have to read what you wrote in front of the class, and then you would get processed in front of the class about what you wrote. Or when we did the Crucible play, we would get like processed about
I don't know what
how
the Crucible play is, but okay.
That's pretty standard in schools.
Okay.
Like randomly, they actually did something that was a standard thing in schools, but like, or the Scarlet Letter, like when we read certain things or we had to write about them, then you would get processed. The Crucible one, because it's a play about the Salem witch trials, and so we all would randomly get assigned characters, and then you would have to look at how you were like your character, because God must have assigned each of us those, or Duran, much of it. It wasn't just by happenstance that like you got that character. So then now we are going to get processed as we act out this play, like how we are like the characters that we
the
picked.
Witches.
Or the people who, like accused them. So
it's just mind.
But that stuff was happening like everywhere,
yeah.
And so you were constantly getting, the processes were just constantly happening, whether they were big or they were little. But they were all designed to like break you down, to like make you consistently and constantly look at what was wrong in you and what was wrong with you and what was wrong with the dynamics in your life and how you were creating that and how you needed to take responsibility for it. And I was thinking about it this morning, how often the narrative was always that we were suppressed. Do you remember that?
Oh my God,
You're
yes.
so suppressed.
Yeah.
Like you're all these emotions and these feelings that we're supposedly suppressing. And so we were always trying to figure out
what you were suppressing.
You were suppressed about.
Yeah.
Which was really the fact that you didn't want to be there. And the people, and you wanted to get away from these people. Like that was what we were all really truly suppressing. But we were always trying to come up with a different story than what was really true and real for us. And so even in processes, it was expected, we were expected to bring things to process, just like we were expected to bring things to trance. And then you just throw yourself on the chopping block. And then, yes, you also become the monster in those rooms, because they would either scream at you till you were at the breaking point where you literally just completely lost control, right, of every system inside of yourself, and you would just kind of explode. And that would be like crying, emotional upheaval, confessing to things that maybe you didn't even really feel or believe were true. Like they would break you down to such a point that you finally just had to like say something.
Well, and do you remember that? Sorry to cut you off, but like the confessing something, like I used to do that. I feel like a lot, where I used to like come up with something and confess it to try to put
diffuse it. To try to
it.
diffuse it. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Like coming up with things, or feeling again like there's something wrong with me. I also felt like I was super suppressed, and I couldn't even figure out what to bring to the table and what to talk about. Because again, the only thing that I truly, really ever felt and wanted to talk about was the fact that I hated those people and I didn't want to be around them.
Yeah.
Most of the people that I had feelings about and that I was struggling with were the people who were leading the processes.
Oh, yeah.
And so there would also be times where we would have family meetings, and mom would be like asking me, what's wrong with you? What's going on with you? And the person who was abusing me the most in those moments was sitting right next to mom. And so I couldn't be honest about what was really going on with me and what I was really feeling. I had to make up stories and lie.
Yeah.
And we were all kind of doing that to an extent everywhere. But the problem with that also is that it created this narrative inside, right? About that. The thing about that was that it continued to create this and encourage this and confirm this narrative that there is something really wrong with me and I'm really broken.
Yeah.
And I'm really weak, and I really can I can hardly and barely survive this experience and this circumstance with these people. And again, it's never because of them. It's because there's something wrong in me. And so the narrative of like constantly looking inside of yourself and constantly looking at what was wrong with you and constantly having to come up with something was so embedded in our systems, so deeply embedded in our systems at such a young age. It like makes me sad to think of these little tiny children who had no innocence, who had no ability to ever just like really truly be free and experience life and feel like we were encouraged and loved, and like none of that was created inside of us or encouraged inside of us when we were little. It was conform, it was fear, anxiety, manipulation, gaslighting, like every single like negative complex issue that you can create inside of someone was encouraged and created inside of ourselves and our systems when we were little. So it creates this like chronic stress response that we were all living in as children, all together, right? Yeah. And then just this loop of like these group dynamics, and then these like interpersonal dynamics that just fed into the system, right? Over and over and over again. And so like there is nothing healthy inside of yourself that you can even grasp onto, because you've had to fracture and shatter internally so many times over and over and over again to survive, that when you get on the other side of it, like we did, right? You're like really looking at it, you have to do so much work to come back to just like a baseline of like, oh my God, I have choice. Oh my God, like I can say no, or even it's okay for me to stand up and leave this room.
Yeah, that's
like
a big
I
one.
have access to, this is uncomfortable for me right now. It is okay for me to stand up and leave, because even that wasn't okay. Like that was not okay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just a really interesting thing. When I think about it and look at it from like just the perspective of like the inner world and the dynamic and the like really the true like nervous system responses that were created inside of us as children, and the way that they developed those was really through just breaking us down like over and over and over again.
Yeah. And this is part of, that, thank you for sharing that, because I feel like in the work that you've done, right? Like you've worked so hard to understand the nervous system and how to heal yourself, but also how to help other people heal. And you've done with that stuff, like you've helped people from all walks of life, right? Like where I hear you talk and I'm like sitting over here like, oh my gosh, like I just still feel activated. I still feel that brokenness, I don't believe that I'm broken, but I still feel it.
Yeah, because it's in the body, right? It's like it's a part of it's a part of the way that the body learned to respond to the trauma, and then that gets kind of locked in the system.
Yeah.
And
it does.
So and then you get triggered, and I get triggered too. I mean, it's not like I'm not feeling triggered talking about this and this dynamic. It's just that I understand now a little bit more through having to like sit in these feelings in certain sessions that for myself, like, oh shoot, like I actually can get up and leave. Like I've had to, like I've sat in sessions before where the practitioner is like, do you know that you can leave right now, that you have access to like getting up and walking out? And I didn't, like because in that state, when you're activated like that, I was like, I actually don't. I had to get up and just open the door. She was like, had me get up and open the door, come back and sit down, and then just turn around and look and see that the door was open. Like you have to take baby steps to retrain your nervous system.
Do you remember when I called you after that one somatic session I did?
Yeah.
I tried to do a somatic session with somebody. I was at that point, I was like, I don't want to work with my sister, even though she did somatic work, because I was like, you can't handle me. Like,
you can't handle, how dare you?
Well, and it was just also like this place when you're going through your healing journey, for me, it was like, also protection for you. Like, I don't want to
You don't want to
give
trigger
you
me,
all of
yeah.
my pain and trigger you. But so I went to a different somatic worker, and in one session, I was so paralyzed I had to call stuff. I couldn't even turn the car on. Like, I couldn't even make the decision to turn my car on because I was so paralyzed in the mind. Like, she took me through this
She took
tunnel.
you too far.
Oh my gosh.
So-
and it was like literally paralyzing because my body could not physically respond to the fact that I wasn't in that situation,
Yeah.
and that I could open the door, that I feel like I freaking like probably crawled out of
Yeah.
that session into my car, and I just sat there like completely paralyzed because
we were raised in very complex trauma that needs a very specific type of practitioner who understands how to work with your system, but also in work, in any kind of trauma work, you can easily re-traumatize the client or the patient if you are not being very careful about how far you take them into an experience. So if you go too far into the experience in the session, what happens, and you don't get regulated back at the end, then you actually go into a place where you're re-traumatizing yourself, or you're getting re-traumatized by the experience, and then that creates more trauma in the system. So it actually re-traumatized you. She went in way too far with you. That's why I was saying, like, opening the door, that's a baby step.
But
the system needs to feel, you have to go little by little by little. There's a process for that with people. And so you can't go too far too fast, or it actually is really harmful. It's so harmful for someone to go too far into something. And again, like, there are so many parts of just, if we were just to talk about processing and the experience, the physiological trauma, the experience that we went through just in sitting in one process, that someone would go through in one process. Like, we went through that over and over and over and over and over again. From when we were really, really tiny and really impressionable. And so that is so locked into our systems. You can unravel it and you can heal it and transform it and change it, but it has to be done in a really very delicate and very aware way, in a healthy dynamic with a practitioner. So you did eventually come do somatic work with me.
I did.
Yeah.
And after that, I was like, actually, maybe I need to come see you.
Yeah. And you noticed
and it was healing. I mean, because you're really, really good at what you do. Also, there was a place for me where I didn't realize how safe it felt to be able to sit in a room where I could say that one thing that I was feeling, and you were like, you completely held it and knew exactly where I was at. Because when you're doing healing work, like somatic work, I mean, it's about how your body feels, right? Like, where do you feel that in your body? And I'm like, oh, my whole freaking body's numb, right? Like, just completely numb. Don't even know where my hands, my legs, my arms are, right? So, I think with the processing,
destroyed our nervous systems.
Destroyed our nervous systems. And
that was the point, by the way. The point was to destroy any part of us that had access to fight or flight, and to turn on extreme freeze and fawn, right? So either now I am in a people-pleasing performance state to get out, and also I'm in a complete disassociation free state because I'm so overwhelmed. I literally have to pop out of my body to get through this. And then on the outside, to leave the process now with your system down regulating in this huge feeling of relief that you just went through that process and you survived. The problem with that too is that then that creates this scenario where it's like, oh, you can actually associate that mistakenly with that being a healthy thing. Like, your system now feels the relief of I just went through this spiritual process, when nothing healthy actually happened in that space. Nothing. The relief is because you're on the other side of it and you survived it, and also because your system isn't being so severely activated that you actually can take a breath. But when I think about those rooms and those processes, I don't feel like anyone was breathing. No, everybody was holding their breath and just riding the ride, the horror show that we were going through to get through to the other side. And they were horrific. There was nothing healthy that happened in those rooms.
No. Nothing.
Ever.
Nothing. And
Ever. But it really was like that dynamic, like really was set up to you know, you tear people down, you turn them against themselves, and then you create that loop, and then they're easier to control. Now they're looped into this really sick, sadistic like loop of like, now I'm trying to please you so that I don't get in trouble, right? And this is where this dynamic of like people getting stuck in these systems. And now I have no access. Again, I have no access to my fight. I have no access to my flight. Both of those things are necessary and needed to leave a cult. If you don't have access to a fight response, which they do.
I'm only laughing because I can remember when my fight response got activated, and that is like, I was like,
yeah, and you're like, oh my God, I have power again.
It took me a year, but I was like, oh fuck, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, because there's this dependency now, because I now need these people to survive. I have no access to my power. If you can't access your fight response, you can't access your power. They go hand in hand. So if you're not capable of getting angry in a healthy way, our examples of anger were the leaders who were abusing people with it, right? Power and anger went hand in hand, and very unhealthy, like authority figures. And so as children, both of those things got turned off for us like real quickly. Like we had no access to a true anger response unless it was being manipulated within a process. Or if there was an experience of people having any kind of fight response, they would use those people as an example and beat down on them. So you don't want to touch that. That's bad. That's like going to hurt me even worse going that direction. So I'm going to comply. I'm going to please. I'm going to pretend like I want to be here. I'm going to disassociate like crazy. And I'm going to turn against myself.
Yeah.
And be the bad guy over and over and over again. And that's the dynamic that those processes create in people and in us. That's what they created in us.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a really good explanation of it. And I mean, the process, now we can, now we can access that and see it from this point of view. But my God, when you're living in it, like, that's the thing. Like, I feel like when people are like, how do you even get involved in that? You did a great job explaining that. It's like you just can't get out. Like you have no access to your fight, but you're so beaten down that you just surrender. That's how I felt. Like I remember like consciously just being like, I surrender. Like I give. Like beat me up, do whatever you want to me, because
this is what life is.
This is what life is.
Yeah.
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 So pretty sad way to live, really.
Yeah, it's very unhealthy. And probably like there's so many. I'm like, was it the worst part?
I don't know.
I don't know if you can even categorize it at this point, but it was definitely it was one of the most unhealthy parts.
Yeah.
And again, like how they manipulated and a lot of how they manipulated and controlled and got people looped into never leaving.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, there's our episode on process. Stay tuned for the next one. It's going to be real fun.